The day I broke up with Daniel. We used the most vicious words to wish each other a life of loneliness. Later, after graduating from university, he went to City A and I went to City B. Out of spite, we vowed never to see each other again in this lifetime. 7 years later, I returned to my hometown for a blind date. I accidentally met a little boy in a restaurant who bore a slight resemblance to Daniel. He hugged my leg and stared at me for a long time. I squatted down and asked him with a smile which family he belonged to. Then a familiar voice came from behind me. "He's my son." Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. I was taken aback for a moment and turned around to see Daniel standing at the door. He was wearing a black coat, and his inky, tousled hair slightly covered his eyes and brows. Compared to 5 years ago, he had become much more composed. The person on the blind date beside me asked me, "Do you know each other?" I replied, "Yes. His name is Daniel. My first love." He was the big heartthrob who sat next to me during my university days. He secretly followed me after school to walk me home. And on rainy days, he would hand me his umbrella and run home in the rain himself. When I got caught for asking my roommate to sign in for me so that I could go to a concert and got my credits deducted, he stood outside the student union office and gave me a piece of candy. When he played basketball, after every cheer for his winning a game, he would always be the first to look at me in the audience. We kissed in the small forest. We went to concerts together. We also went to the grassland to look at the stars during the holidays. At the age of 20, he stood on the rooftop of the 56th floor and shouted, "Daniel will always love Sylvia." The feelings in our youth were so passionate. How could they be so easily forgotten? After breaking up with Daniel, I had imagined many scenarios of meeting him again. I just never thought it would be like this. The little boy standing in front of me was wearing a white polo shirt and sweatpants, and his face bore a slight resemblance to Daniel's, especially those tightly pursed thin lips. Through him, I seemed to see what Daniel looked like when he was a child. I can't remember the reason for our breakup anymore. I only remember that on the day we broke up, we used the most vicious words to wish each other a life of loneliness. Later, we slammed the doors and went back to our own rooms. I leaned against the door and cried for a long time. The next morning, I packed my things and moved back to the dormitory. 3 months later, on the day of our graduation, a junior schoolmate enthusiastically invited him to take a photo together. He glanced at me. I turned around and avoided his gaze. My roommate said with a look of pity, "Did you really break up like this? Isn't it a pity? I heard that Daniel's company is going to move to City A. You probably won't see each other again in the future." My heart ached terribly, but I still packed my things and went to City B. I acted as if we would never see each other until we were old and dead. I should be glad that because of the blind date today, my mother dragged me to get dressed up early in the morning. Now I'm wearing a trench coat and high heels, with delicate makeup, looking like an urban beauty. At least I'm not too embarrassed. After all, in novels, when the hero and the heroine meet again, the heroine always meets the hero with no makeup on. But I'm not the heroine. Long time no see. His voice was calm, but his fingers with distinct joints were tightly clenched together. I pushed aside the sourness in my heart, tried my best to adjust my emotions, stood up and smiled at him. Long time no see. He glanced at the blind date next to me, who was wearing glasses and had a delicate appearance. He raised his eyebrows at me. "On a blind date?" I nodded. He smiled self-deprecatingly and reached out to take the little boy's hand. "Then we won't bother you." The little boy hugged my leg tightly. Daniel couldn't reach out easily, so he just squinted his eyes slightly. Only then did the little boy let go of my leg. But his big, round eyes looked at me pitifully. This child hadn't said a word since he came up to me. But when the person on the blind date tried to put some food in my bowl, he would move my bowl away. The person on the blind date asked him awkwardly what was wrong. He pursed his little mouth and didn't say anything. He looked somewhat like Daniel when he was angry. Looking at Daniel's cold eyes, I tried to smooth things over and said, "This child looks a lot like you." Daniel raised his eyes and looked straight at me. His eyes are more like his mother's. My heart seemed to be stung. I avoided his gaze. He should be very happy now. It turned out that it was always me who was lonely. I didn't say anything more. I nodded at the little boy and sat back at the table. Seeing this, the person on the blind date put a chopstick full of food in my bowl. "You haven't eaten much yet." Daniel stood beside me and sneered. When he left, he said, "Fabian, let's go. We won't disturb Auntie's blind date anymore." My hand stiffened slightly. On that summer night when I was 20, after my date with Daniel, when we saw a family of 3 in front of us, he said, "Sylvia, let's name our future child Fabian." After Daniel left, the person on the blind date asked me a few questions. At first, I didn't want to talk about it. It was only when he kept asking that I said, "He's my ex-boyfriend." The person on the blind date smiled awkwardly. "He already has a child. But it's okay. After we get married, we can have a child right away. I feel sorry for you when I heard your mother say that you've been struggling on your own in the capital. In the future, you can stay here. I'm a teacher, and my salary is stable enough to support our family's expenses. Then you can stay at home to take care of the children and the elderly. We can have the man take care of the internal affairs and the woman handle the external affairs." Listening to his chatter, I took a sip of water and made an excuse that I had some other things to do and got up to leave. When I was leaving, he looked at the bill and smiled awkwardly. How about we go Dutch? It's not that I'm stingy, but we haven't confirmed our relationship yet." The young waiter looked at me in amazement. Hearing the words of the person on the blind date, there was nothing but contempt in his eyes. I smiled and took the bill from the waiter's hand. "No need. I'll pay. More than 200 yuan is not a big deal for me, and I don't want to add him on WeChat and have any further contact with him in the future. If it weren't for the fact that my mother fell down the stairs and hurt her leg, and I was just harassed by my company's leader and simply resigned, I wouldn't have come back, let alone agreed to the blind date under my mother's coercion." When I got home, my mother asked me excitedly about the result of the blind date. I changed into a set of home clothes, looking at her with a crutch. I said helplessly, "It didn't work out. Mom, stop forcing me. He's not even as tall as me when he stands up." My mother mumbled, "Who's forcing you? You're already 27 years old and still don't have a boyfriend. You're all alone in the capital. How can I not worry about you?" Although Gordon is not tall, his family has a strong academic background. He's a math teacher himself, and his family has a house and a car. There are quite a few girls who want to marry him. He can just jump up to be as tall as you. You don't like this one and don't like that one. What kind of person do you actually like? Listening to the chatter outside the door, Daniel's face flashed through my mind. Then I smiled self-deprecatingly. "Sylvia, what are you thinking about? You broke up a long time ago, and he's already married and has a child. Just go back to sleep. The pace of life in my hometown is slow. The doctor said that my mother's leg only needs to rest at home for a month and it will be okay. So I just regarded it as taking a long vacation myself. It seemed that I wanted to make up for all the sleep I had missed in the capital. For 2 consecutive days, all I did was eat and sleep. Early on Monday morning, my mother finally couldn't stand it and opened the curtains to wake me up. "Don't just sleep all day long. Your father said that you slept for 20 hours on the sofa yesterday and couldn't be woken up. He thought you were dead. Today is Monday. I've already talked to the director. I've arranged for you to substitute for me at school for a month this month. Hurry up and get dressed and go to school to report." I originally wanted to resist, but Jim's dad from the school had already called me. "Sylvia, you're a top student. Your mother is a head teacher. I really can't find someone to take her place for a month in such a short time. This Jim's dad is the director of the school and an old acquaintance of my mother's. His wife doesn't have a daughter. When I was a child, she often bought me dresses and princess shoes to dress me up. I felt a bit embarrassed and could only agree. When I stood on the podium, the children below all widened their eyes and covered their little mouths. They were incredibly cute, but I didn't expect to see that little boy in the first row. I glanced at the childish strokes on his book. Fabian. It's a nice name. After a class, compared to the other children who would occasionally whisper and discuss, Fabian was particularly quiet. I was a bit puzzled in my heart. Why hasn't this child said a word? So I could only ask him to answer a simple small question. He stood up and looked at me, still not saying a word. I was even more confused. The bell rang for the end of the class. The children gathered in front of me. Ms. Sylvia, you're so pretty. Ms. Sylvia, will I be like you when I grow up? Ms. Sylvia, will you stay here forever? I smiled and answered them one by one. After work, I asked my mother about Fabian. My mother sighed. That child has autism. You have to take care of him when you can. I responded with a nod. After that, I often tried to guide Fabian to speak after class. His condition seemed to be getting better and better. He would answer questions when asked in class, although his voice wasn't very loud. But it was still a good start. Until half a month later, a little girl with a ponytail rushed into my office and shouted, "Ms. Sylvia, Fabian and Harry are fighting." When I rushed over, both children were covered in dirt. Harry was even pinned down by Fabian, and there was a bruise on his face. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly separated the two children. After taking them to the infirmary to deal with their wounds, I took them to the office, but no matter how I asked, the two children refused to say why they were fighting. So I had to call the parents of the two children. When Harry's parents learned that their child was injured, they were immediately furious and said they would come over right away. And in Fabian's contact information column for parents, I saw Daniel's phone number. The column for the mother was blank. I could only call him. It seemed that he was in a meeting. His voice stopped abruptly after it sounded for a second. Looking at Fabian in front of me, who also had some scratches on his face, I took a deep breath and said, "Are you Fabian's father?" "I'm Fabian's substitute teacher, Sylvia. He had a conflict and a physical fight with another child at school. If it's convenient, could you come to the school?" After I finished speaking, there was no sound from the other side for a long time. After a long time, he said, "Okay." When Daniel came, Harry's parents had already arrived. Seeing the injury on Harry's face, they were naturally very angry and immediately started scolding Fabian. I frowned and stopped them. "Harry's father, I know you love your child, but the matter hasn't been fully understood yet. And for problems between children, adults can only mediate. If you have any issues, you can communicate with his father." Harry's father looked at me and reluctantly withdrew his hand. I squatted down and asked Harry in a low voice why he fought with Fabian. He avoided my gaze guiltily. I had no choice but to ask Fabian again. He looked at me and pursed his lips tightly. He said, "I don't have a mother." Daniel happened to come over. Hearing this, there was a hint of displeasure in his eyes, but Harry's father immediately slapped Harry on the head hard. "You child, how could you say that he doesn't have a mother? Hurry up and apologize to him." Then he said to me, "Sorry, Ms. Sylvia. It must be my child's fault. He deserves to be taught a lesson. It's okay now. It's okay." Harry looked at Fabian. "Sorry, Fabian. I shouldn't have said you don't have a mother." The subsequent matters were easier to deal with. Harry's father looked at Daniel and apologized. Daniel naturally didn't say anything. Harry's father took his child and left first. It was already past the school dismissal time. There were only 3 of us in the office. Me, Daniel, and Fabian. After I explained a few things, he looked at me and didn't seem to have the intention of leaving. The old-fashioned clock on the wall was ticking and turning in circles. Time passed bit by bit. I could only say hello to Fabian and leave first. I ran into the person from the blind date at the door. When he saw me, he immediately followed me. Daniel, holding Fabian's hand, walked behind us. The person from the blind date beside me was still inviting me to visit the house he had just bought. He was still talking. "The house was fully paid for by my family. You just need to pay for the decoration, and then you'll have a place to live. How great is that? Then ask your family to give a car as a dowry. Then we'll have both a house and a car." It turned out that the house was fully paid for by his family, which had nothing to do with me, and I still had to pay for the decoration and buy a car. His thought so obviously that it felt like the beads were jumping right in my face. Out of consideration for the fact that we were now colleagues, I didn't say anything. I just decided to take a detour whenever I saw him in the next month. Unexpectedly, a clear sneer from a man came from behind. The person on the blind date blushed, turned around and looked at Daniel's stern face and his imposing manner that made him seem not to be messed with, and finally swallowed the words in his mouth. He just looked at me and left a sentence. "Ms. Sylvia, think about it again. I'll wait for you." After saying that, before I could say anything, he left immediately. I frowned and could only walk to the parking lot by myself. I planned to make things clear to him next time. After all, I really had no feelings for him. Before getting into the car, Daniel suddenly grabbed my hand. I slightly raised my eyes and looked at him in surprise. He seemed to have just realized what he was doing and let go of my hand. He just said coldly, "Ms. Sylvia, I have something to talk to you about. Something related to Fabian. If you have time, can we have a chat? It's about his illness. After thinking about it, I still drove with Daniel to a coffee shop. He slightly crossed his long legs, and his expression didn't change at all. His gaze was just fixed on Fabian, who was playing with toys in the children's area not far away. Fabian has autism. MS. Sylvia should know that. Right. I nodded. His mother passed away right after he was born. The doctor said that his autism is largely due to this. He longs for his mother's love. I was a bit puzzled and didn't understand why he was telling me all this. I could only follow his words and say, "Then Mr. Daniel can try to find a mother for him." Daniel sneered. "Of course. So I'm discussing it with Miss Sylvia, aren't I?" Seeing the confused look on my face, he leaned slightly forward and looked straight at me. "Sylvia, I'm in need of a wife. So, would you like to give it a try with me?" I looked at this face that was so close. I slightly turned my face to the side. I instinctively wanted to open my mouth and refuse. But unexpectedly, my mother called. "Sylvia, didn't I tell you to communicate more with that person?" Why did his mother say sarcastically that you looked down on her son? What exactly do you mean? I felt a bit of a headache. I glanced at Daniel and said in a low voice, "That's exactly what I mean." My mother continued to nag. "You don't like such good conditions. Are you going to stay alone in the capital forever? Fine. If you really don't like him, I'll arrange some other people for you. I still have quite a few candidates in my hands." I was a bit scared and really didn't want to go on blind dates anymore. I could only force myself to tell my mother, "Mom, I have a boyfriend. Don't introduce anyone else to me." After saying that, without paying attention to the excitement on the other end, I hung up the phone directly. Daniel's eyes flickered slightly. "Before Fabian recovers from his illness, I will give MS Sylvia 10 million yuan every year as treatment fees. So, would you like to?" I interrupted him. "Okay. Is it a fake marriage?" Daniel smiled. "It is indeed a fake marriage. But Fabian's IQ isn't that low. So, we need to get a marriage certificate." Sylvia. When I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau in a daze, Daniel took the marriage certificate from my hand. He said he would show it to Fabian at night. He also took me to my home. My mother pulled him aside and interrogated him about his entire family background. When she finally asked about Fabian, Daniel looked at me. "He's my sister's son. She entrusted Fabian to me before she passed away." My mother had been a teacher for many years, and she actually liked Daniel even more because of this. Finally, I really couldn't stand my mother's questioning and urged Daniel to leave. My mother reacted first. Yes. Hurry up and pack your things and leave." I looked at the tightly closed door in front of me and the suitcase that had been thrown out the door. There was a hint of a smile in Daniel's eyes beside me. "Sylvia, come home with me," he added. "Don't get me wrong. It's just to let you have more contact with Fabian." I thought of the black card he gave me after we came out of the Civil Affairs Bureau. I could only go to his home with Daniel, in the single-family villa in the city center of my hometown. Daniel rarely stayed here, except for a servant's room on the first floor. Only 2 rooms on the second floor of the whole building had been cleaned. He could only give his own room to me, and he went to sleep with Fabian. The quilt was filled with the faint cold fragrance of Daniel. Once, I had smelled this scent countless times. He had kissed me countless times and said he loved me. But that was just the past. Early the next morning, when I went downstairs, the 2 men, one big and one small, were already at the dining table. When he saw me, Daniel didn't even raise his head. I don't know what he said to Fabian, but Fabian was extremely happy. He carefully called me Mommy. I was slightly taken aback. Daniel put down the magazine in his hand and looked at Fabian. "Don't call people randomly." Fabian looked at me, and the joy in his eyes disappeared. Looking at Daniel's current appearance, I was somehow angry. I didn't understand why he said that. He was the one who asked me to be the mother, and he was the one who didn't allow Fabian to call me. But Daniel and I had an employment relationship, and the child was his after all. What stance could I take to say anything? Until I got in the car. I didn't talk to Daniel. He frowned. "You're still young, and I'm not sure if you're willing to let him call you Mommy." I looked out of the car window and nodded randomly. He didn't say anything, just sneered. "I hope Miss Sylvia can play the role of a good mother. Also, once the contract starts, Unless I agree. Ms. Sylvia can't easily terminate it. Sylvia, I won't let you dump me as easily as you did 7 years ago. My lips trembled slightly, but I couldn't say a word. When school was over in the evening, I held Fabian's hand and we each bit on a lollipop beside the snack store at the school gate. We were waiting for Daniel to come and pick us up. The villa he lived in was too remote to get a taxi. I didn't wait for Daniel, but I waited for Jim. When he saw me, he came up to me. Ms. Sylvia, why haven't you gone back yet? Have you considered the thing I asked you to think about yesterday? I quickly interrupted him. Sorry, Mr. Jim, we're really not suitable, and I'm already married. I originally just wanted to end the conversation with him immediately. Unexpectedly, he sneered. Already married so soon? Ms. Sylvia, even if you're rejecting me, there's no need to be so perfunctory. Right, although Ms. Sylvia is beautiful, my conditions aren't bad either. Married. Ms. Sylvia, can you tell me who your husband is? Daniel's voice came from behind. It's me. Jim laughed. Ms. Sylvia, you actually chose a man who's been married before and has a child. You'll regret it. Daniel stepped forward and kicked Jim's calf with a sneer. Get lost now. Daniel took me and Fabian to the amusement park. I played with Fabian until we were exhausted. Daniel would just stand beside us and occasionally look at us. When we went back, as soon as we got in the car, Fabian fell asleep from exhaustion. I lay in the passenger seat, staring at the road ahead, and soon felt drowsy. Someone lifted the hair that was hanging on my side face. He let out a soft sigh. Sylvia, in these 7 years, have you ever thought about me? I was in a daze. Yes. There was a soft laugh in my ear. In a trance. Someone bit my neck. Thought about me. Then why did you insist on breaking up with me 7 years ago? When I woke up again, Fabian and I were already lying in the twin-bedded room on the plane. Daniel on one side looked over. Something happened in the company, and I need to take you guys to Hong Kong City. Don't worry. Your mother's leg injury has already healed, and she can go back to work. I've already told them about going to Hong Kong City. Fabian's transfer procedures have also been completed. I thought about it. When we broke up, Daniel's company already had a certain scale. After 7 years, its development was probably very good. Most likely, the company in my hometown was just a subsidiary now. I responded with a nod. Anyway, I was unemployed now, and it didn't matter where I went. It was quite nice to take the money and take Fabian to play around. At least during these days, I could relax after countless overtime days and nights in the past 7 years. When the plane landed, there were a lot of people at the airport exit. Daniel held Fabian's hand with one hand and still held my hand with the other. I raised my eyes in surprise. The tips of his ears turned slightly red. Don't get me wrong. I'm just afraid that you'll get lost. Who will help Fabian with his treatment then? I blinked. I remembered that I was a complete directionally challenged person during my university days. Once during a date, I got separated from Daniel. He went to exit C, and I was at exit A. My bag was still in his hand, and I didn't have my phone with me. Daniel was so worried that he searched all over the mall for me. When he found me, I was buying a cake in a nearby cake shop. When I saw him, I smiled and asked him to pay for it because I didn't have any cash. He was so angry that he laughed. On the way back, he never let go of my hand. The people who came to pick us up at the airport were Daniel's 2 assistants. One was a man and the other was a woman. Looking at me, there was only a hint of surprise in their eyes. And then they turned around and introduced themselves. Daniel asked the female assistant to add my contact information. In case I couldn't reach him if something happened, I could call his assistant. After a period of time, Fabian was studying in a private school in Hong Kong City. His condition had also been greatly relieved. It was worth it for me to take him out every day during this time to get in touch with nature and all kinds of new things. Daniel spent very little time with him. I thought that the main reason for the child's autism might be that he was too lonely and longed for company but couldn't get it. Fabian was very obedient. But once he went to school, I didn't have much to do. After thinking about it, after Daniel got off work, I knocked on his door with a glass of milk in my hand. He opened the door. He had just come out of the bathroom. There were still a few drops of water sliding down his well-defined abdominal muscles on his chest and into the grooves. Looking further down, I swallowed. I instinctively blushed a bit. When I raised my eyes, I met Daniel's teasing gaze. I quickly turned my face to the side. He only had a short bath towel loosely tied around his waist. His beautiful mermaid line was revealed, and it seemed that if he took one more step, the bath towel would fall off. He slightly bent down and leaned over next to my ear. "Ms. Sylvia, are you satisfied?" I nodded and then quickly shook my head. He let out a low laugh. He stepped aside to let me in. I let out a sigh of relief and put the milk aside. I felt a bit embarrassed and stated my request. "During the day, Fabian isn't at home, and I want to go out and find a job." Thinking of the eye-catching number in the card he gave me, I still felt a bit embarrassed. He nodded. "You don't need to tell me, Sylvia. You can do whatever you want." In the dim light, he was too close to me. The last sentence somehow carried a hint of ambiguity. I instinctively wanted to leave, but I accidentally tripped over the leg of the sofa and lunged forward towards him. Daniel instinctively put his arm around my head, and he fell to the floor. The nice smell of his body wash rushed towards me. I instinctively looked up, and my lips brushed past. A low groan escaped from his throat. After I saw clearly what was in front of me, I immediately blushed and got up. As soon as I got up, I saw that the bath towel around his waist had already fallen. It only covered a little bit of the private part, and the towel was propped up. Somehow, I felt a bit regretful. "Have you seen enough?" I immediately turned my face to the side and stood there with my head down like a quail. He wrapped the bath towel around himself. He stood up and pressed me against the wall, grabbed my neck, and kissed me. It was urgent and intense. My fingertips curled deeply, almost digging into my palms. He reached out and intertwined his fingers with mine. After a long time, I closed my eyes and gently kissed him back. He paused for a moment. Then there was an even more intense kiss. When he stopped, my legs were so weak from the kiss. Daniel let out a soft laugh and carried me back to my room. He put me on the bed. Before he left, he lowered his head and kissed my forehead. "Sylvia, good night." And I tossed and turned for a long time before I finally fell asleep. "Good night, Daniel." I accepted the job offer from a company. The starting date was next week. I still had a lot of free time during this period. When I was lying on the sofa scrolling through Instagram, I saw a new post by Daniel's assistant Tracy. The background of the photo was a meeting scene, and there was expensive mineral water in front of everyone. Only in front of her was a cup of milk tea. The caption read, "Thanks to the boss for his favor." I lowered my eyes. I clicked on her profile and checked all her Instagram posts. I found that during this period, she often posted on Instagram. There were photos of her attending banquets with Daniel. There were also selfies of her sitting in Daniel's extended Rolls-Royce. In the photos, Daniel's hand or leg would always be deliberately shown. I felt a bit sour in my heart. I knew that I still liked him. Remembering what happened last night, I wanted to fight for myself. I cooked a meal for Daniel. When I was with Daniel before, he never let me cook. It was only in the 7 years when I was alone later that I gradually learned how to cook. To take good care of myself, I packed the food and took it to his company. But just as I walked to the door of Daniel's office, I saw what was inside. Fabian was lying on the sofa and had fallen asleep. Tracy took a blanket and covered him with it. Daniel was standing beside her, and I didn't know what they were talking about. Tracy was smiling happily. It looked just like a family of 3. I stiffened all over, looking at the thermal bucket in my hand. I didn't know what I was doing. Between Daniel and me, it was me who proposed the breakup. That day, Daniel said with red eyes, "Those who betray true feelings have to swallow 10,000 silver needles." Looking at the piercing scene in front of me, I thought what he said was true, even though I had no choice but to propose the breakup back then. When he asked me if we could not break up, I still refused. What was I doing now? Perhaps what happened yesterday was just an accident in an ambiguous atmosphere. I threw the thermal bucket into the trash can beside me. I turned around and left. I somehow didn't know where to go. Just then, my best friend called me. "Sylvia, guess where I am now? Get ready to treat me to a meal." She had been transferred to a different position by the company. I made an appointment with her in a newly opened bar to celebrate that we could see each other every day in the days to come. By the end of the drinking, I lay on the table and watched as a tall man in a dark suit jacket hurried towards us. I said to my best friend, "Your husband." My best friend looked over and rolled her eyes at me. "He's your husband." I shook my head. "Your husband." My best friend said again. It's Daniel. He's really your husband. I remembered the scene I saw in the afternoon. I shook my head. I don't want a man who's been married before. Let whoever wants him have him. I saw that the man stopped in his tracks. He took off his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. Then picked me up in his arms horizontally. My best friend clicked her tongue. She got up and stepped forward to open the car door for Daniel. He put me in the passenger seat. She's not feeling well today. Daniel's hand paused slightly, and he responded with a hum. After we got back, Daniel carried me out of the car. I looked at his sharp jawline and that face that was so close to mine. I resisted slightly. I don't want a man who's been married before. He stopped in his tracks. Yeah, this is my first marriage. Also, Sylvia, you already rejected me once. This time, it's not allowed. I heard Fabian come out and say weakly, Mommy, if you don't want him, can you want me? I responded in a daze. Yes, I like Fabian the most. Daniel somehow gritted his teeth and said, buy the son and get the father for free. If you want my son, you have to take me along with him. I slightly complained. Forced love is never sweet. He closed the door and threw me onto the bed. Whether it's sweet or not, you have to taste it to know. He kissed me. After a long time, he kissed the corner of my eye contentedly and laughed softly. Forced love can also be sweet. After saying that, he covered me with the quilt before leaving. The next day, when I went downstairs, Daniel was sitting at the dining table, holding a financial magazine in his hand. Fabian was sitting opposite, having breakfast. When he saw me coming downstairs, he quickly shouted, Mommy, I saved some strawberries for you. I smiled. Thank you, little Fabian. Mommy likes you the most. Daniel beside me frowned and asked someone to send Fabian to school. When I sat down, he frowned. I also saved some strawberries for you. I was slightly taken aback, remembering the absurdity of last night. I still blushed a bit, but seeing the man's cold expression, I nodded. Thank you. He didn't say anything. He got up and prepared to leave, but when he walked outside the door, he said, Sylvia, will you still bring me lunch today? I was slightly taken aback. I instinctively distanced myself from him and shook my head. No, Daniel, we're just in an employer-employee relationship, aren't we? Once Fabian recovers from his illness, I'll leave. Remembering what happened yesterday, I still said this. In such a relationship, I didn't want to let myself fall in love with him wishfully, and I had already found a job now. Daniel stared at me intently for a long time. He let out a self-deprecating laugh and then left. The sour feeling squeezed my heart, and it seemed that the air became thin. I turned around and saw that in the corner of the coffee table, the thermal box I sent yesterday was placed there. When I opened it, it had already been eaten clean. I clicked on Tracy's Instagram post from yesterday. The latest one was a check-in photo of her in a restaurant. Thank you, boss, for having lunch with me. But since he went out to eat, how could he have eaten the meal I made so cleanly? I seemed to understand something. Daniel felt a sharp pain in his heart when he thought of what Sylvia said. He didn't dare to go back, afraid that what happened 7 years ago would repeat itself. Just then, his good friend organized a gathering. After thinking about it, he decided to go, but he didn't expect that Tracy was also in the private room. He frowned and instinctively wanted to drive her out. But since she wasn't brought by him, he didn't feel it was appropriate to ask her to leave. When Tracy passed by him, the wine glass in her hand tilted slightly. He reached out and lazily grabbed the glass. He saw through this little trick at a glance. He raised his eyelids and was just about to mock her and tell her to stop using such petty schemes. After all, he had always been clear about separating public and private affairs in the company. He also didn't think that women couldn't do what men could do. As for the gender of the assistant, it didn't affect the work. Remembering how uncomfortable Sylvia was yesterday, he didn't want her to misunderstand. He didn't want her to be sad even more. Now that Tracy had such thoughts, she naturally couldn't stay. Just as he was about to speak, a woman rushed in from outside the door. It was Sylvia's best friend. She came in and sneered. Mr. Daniel is really lucky. He has one at home and another one outside. Why didn't I see that, mister? Daniel was so amorous when you were dating Sylvia. Did you think about Sylvia when you were like this? He opened his mouth, wanting to explain, but then he remembered the words Sylvia said in the afternoon. He smiled self-deprecatingly. She rejected me first. The others sensed the situation and left one after another. Only he and Sylvia's best friend were left. She rejected you because she's ill. When those words were spoken, Daniel was stunned. He raised his head and stared at her intently. What did you say? Her best friend's eyes turned red. I said that she broke up with you because she has infertility. The medical examination report she had for her internship the year she graduated was taken away by your mother. Your mother found Sylvia and asked her to leave you. Your mother called her a hen that couldn't lay eggs and insulted Sylvia with all kinds of swear words on the street. She told her not to harm you because you like children. Your family needs children, and you wouldn't let a woman with infertility into the family. She begged her to let you go. Daniel's eyes turned red. Tears suddenly fell from his eyes. I didn't know. Those words were like a knife stabbing into Daniel's heart. He lowered his head, and his body was shaking. Thank you. It was just a misunderstanding earlier. I'll fire her. After saying that, he got up and left in big strides. The car drove to the downstairs. He saw the dim yellow light in the house through the French windows. Somehow, he didn't dare to go upstairs. He didn't know that Sylvia had infertility. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. He remembered that once when they were on a date and saw a family of 3 in front of them, Sylvia really liked children. She asked him if he liked children. He nodded, held her hand, and said that they would have a child in the future, and they would name the child Fabian. Sylvia's hand stiffened slightly, and she didn't say anything more. He knew his mother. She grew up in a small county town, favored his younger brother, and often hung out in the mahjong parlor. He knew how insulting the swear words she said were to Sylvia, who was just in her early 20s. But Sylvia was the one he held dear in his heart. If they hadn't separated in these 7 years, they might have already been married. He sat in the car, closed his eyes, and let the tears roll down. Finally, he covered his face and trembled painfully. It was only after a long time that Sylvia outside the car window knocked on the car window. I saw the familiar car downstairs, but I didn't see Daniel get out of the car. So I went downstairs. Unexpectedly, under the car window, I saw the red corners of Daniel's eyes. I was slightly taken aback. Somehow, I felt a bit sad. What's wrong with you? Daniel opened the car door and hugged me tightly in his arms. I apologize to you on behalf of my mother. I'll deal with this matter. Sylvia, I don't care if you can have children or not. When I told you I like children, it's because I like the children you give birth to. If the child isn't yours, then that child means nothing to me. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know you've suffered so many grievances. His tall body was shaking. I knew the reason for his emotional breakdown. I nodded gently. It doesn't matter. Daniel. He put his hands on my shoulders and looked at me almost pleadingly. Sylvia. This time, don't reject me again. I remembered the day I broke up with Daniel. After I proposed the breakup, Daniel was still holding a small cake he brought back for me in his hand. When he heard my words, he was stunned for a long time. He asked me with a trembling voice, why? I had a blank expression and didn't let him see any lingering affection in my eyes. I just frowned and said, I don't like you anymore. Actually, I was with you just because you're rich and handsome. I don't like you at all. I never thought about having a future with you, and now I'm tired of it. I didn't know how I managed to say those hurtful words. I just remembered that Daniel raised his eyes to look at me, and the corners of his eyes were red with anger. Why are you tired of it? Sylvia, you're lying. I didn't say anything, but my heart was crying. He said, Sylvia, do you want me to show you my heart? Sylvia, I will never let go if you can't give a specific reason. Sylvia, why did you suddenly say you want to break up? Is it because I didn't do well enough? Can I change it? I'll change anything you say. Okay. I stood on one side of the sofa. Eventually, I couldn't help it and lowered my head and shed tears. No matter how much he said, I didn't respond. There was a long, long silence. After a long time, he said again, can we not break up? The apartment was so quiet that we could hear our own breathing. We have to break up. Daniel's eyes were scarlet at the corners, and he stared at me intently. If you insist on breaking up today and crushing our relationship like this, then let's pretend we never started. I said, okay. Daniel nodded. Sylvia, those who betray true feelings have to swallow 10,000 silver needles. Sylvia, I wish you a life of loneliness. I raised my head and looked at him. Then I also wish you a life of loneliness. Later, We went back to our own rooms. When I left the next day, I saw the words Daniel left on the sticky note on the coffee table. Sylvia, forget it. I don't want you to live a life of loneliness. When we were young, we were always too ignorant, and we couldn't fight against fate. I was in such a bad state back then that when I encountered such a thing, I didn't have the courage to continue walking with Daniel. And now, I just felt regret. Regret for the best 7 years. We could only miss each other. But after 7 years, I already knew how to deal with problems. Daniel, you and Tracy. Before I could finish, he interrupted me in a hurry. There's nothing between me and her. She's just an assistant. We were just talking about work that day. I've already had her fired since I knew about her feelings for me. Sylvia, I only like you. I nodded. Then let's go home. I didn't tell him that I had also regretted what I said in the afternoon for a long time. Later, Tracy seemed to be scared and sent me a series of messages. The general idea was that the photos she sent me were all staged by herself. And she asked me not to let Daniel blacklist her in the industry. She did have her own petty schemes. When facing Daniel, she thought about forcing me to leave and waiting for herself to succeed in taking my place. But now, she finally understood how terrifying Daniel could be. I originally planned to tell him about my illness tonight when he came back. But unexpectedly, he already knew about it. He paused for a moment, looking a bit stunned, and seemed to be waiting for something. I turned around with a smile, stood on tiptoe, and kissed his lips. Even the sensitive Fabian seemed to sense the change between me and Daniel. But it seemed that he felt more at ease because of it. Before going to bed, he hugged my leg and looked at me. Mommy, can you sleep with me tonight? Daniel, who had just taken a shower and was wearing a silk nightgown, came out of the room. He sneered. No, because my wife has to sleep with me. Fabian pouted and looked at me. You're a big liar. You clearly said before that as long as Miss Sylvia became my mommy, she could sleep with me, and she could sleep with me just like Harry's mom sleeps with Harry. I blinked. The tips of Daniel's ears turned red. Fabian became angrier and angrier as he spoke. It was rare for him to be willing to say so many words, and neither I nor Daniel interrupted him. But it seemed that he was really angry. From his words, I knew that Daniel had often introduced me to Fabian during those 7 years, and on the day of the blind date, he told Fabian not to let the person on the blind date put food in my bowl. That's why his eyes were so cautious that day. I was shocked by Daniel's scheming, but a hint of sweet bitterness welled up in my heart. In the end, Fabian was carried by the collar and thrown back to his own room by Daniel. When he came out again, the tips of his ears were red as he looked at me. He took my hand and led me to the room. In the room with a simple black decoration, Daniel curled the corners of his lips. Sleep here tonight. I'll go get something first. After saying that, he left. After he left, I blushed as I looked around the room. But I saw a photo of us on the bedside table. There was also a bottle of medicine for treating depression. My heart ached dully in an instant. I opened the drawer of his bedside table, and there were bottles of the exact same medicine inside. There was also his medical record book, which contained the treatment records of his depression over the past 7 years. At first, he fantasized about me being by his side. Later, he couldn't fall asleep. He developed a tendency to self-harm. It turned out that in the 7 years we were apart, neither of us had a good time. When Daniel came in with my pillow and a carrot-shaped bolster, his steps paused slightly. I looked up and asked him, "What kind of medicine is this?" He looked straight at me and said, "It's just cold medicine." I laughed, and then I started crying. "You're lying. It's clearly medicine for treating depression." He didn't say anything and hugged me. "It's all right now. As long as you're by my side, everything will be fine." Then he smiled at me and asked, "How did you know this is medicine for depression?" I put my arms around his waist and didn't say anything. He held me tightly in his arms. Although Daniel and I had gotten the marriage certificate, we hadn't had the wedding yet. The wedding was scheduled for next month. The wedding dress and the diamond ring had already been prepared by Daniel before. We entrusted the wedding details to a professional company. However, we still had to go and take the wedding photos in person. After taking the wedding photos, Daniel stopped in front of a supermarket and asked me to sit aside for a while. He went inside himself. While waiting for Daniel at the entrance of the supermarket, I unexpectedly saw his roommate and good friend from university. He walked up to me and didn't show any surprise at seeing me. He called me sister-in-law right away. Then he said, "Is Daniel inside?" I nodded. Then I asked him in confusion, "How did you know we're together?" His friend raised his eyebrows, opened his phone screen, and leaned forward. "Sister-in-law, I'll show you something good." "What kind of good thing?" I was slightly surprised. I saw that on the phone screen was Daniel's Instagram. His good friend scrolled through it and introduced it to me. This was taken on the night of graduation 7 years ago. Daniel was all ready to propose to you. But that day, when we asked your roommate, we found out that you had gone to City B. Daniel drank alone in the private room for a whole night. This was taken some time ago. After he met you again, he started showing off like a peacock and updated his Instagram every day. I took a look. Most of the posts were from this period of time. There were photos of him cooking, fixing a light bulb, and taking care of Fabian. There were also some taken during his work. None of the posts were repetitive. Anyone could tell that he was a man who was extremely rich, handsome, and versatile. Remembering Daniel's Instagram posts from some time ago, I couldn't help but laugh. His friend scrolled to the top. I saw a photo of him holding me in his arms while I was sleeping soundly on the black leather sofa. I didn't even know when he took this photo. In the photo, the way he looked at me was full of affection and tenderness. The caption was, "We still have a story to tell." His friend was known for being talkative. He scrolled to the very bottom of Daniel's Instagram. In the 7 years since I left, he hadn't updated his Instagram, so it was easy to find the post at the bottom. It was a photo from the day Daniel and I got together. But the picture was taken before I met Daniel. I was standing at the entrance of the library, wearing a milky white sweater, holding some documents in one hand and an umbrella in the other. Daniel came out of the convenience store, carrying a white plastic bag in his hand, which contained a pair of comfortable women's slippers. After seeing this photo, I felt a bit awkward. I raised my eyes and asked him, "When did you take this photo?" He turned off his friend's phone screen with a serious expression, squatted down, and took off my high heels. "The first time I saw you." His friend put his phone back in his pocket and smiled in a somewhat annoying way. "Sister-in-law, he had a crush on you back then. After he found out who you were, he often went to your classes." I thought about it. No wonder I often ran into Daniel during that period. I originally thought it was just a coincidence, but it turned out to be on purpose. Remembering that after I fell in love with Daniel and was pursuing him, he had a cold expression on his face, but the tips of his ears were so red that they seemed to be bleeding. I was so proud and even more excited about his shyness. Who would have thought that a top-notch hunter often appears in the guise of prey? "If you don't speak, no one will think you're mute." Daniel said this through gritted teeth. His friend pouted, took the car keys, and left reluctantly. But before leaving, he said, "Scheming guy." Then he whispered, "Sister-in-law, if you want to know more, take a look at the drawer in his study." When his eyes met Daniel's cold gaze, he shrank his head and drove away. I looked up and smiled at Daniel. The tips of his ears turned red, and he reached out to hold my hand. The setting sun in the evening shone on us through the dappled sunlight, and occasionally there were pedestrians riding red bicycles passing by. The convenience store behind us was still playing soft music. Our fingers were intertwined. The first thing Daniel did when we got home was to hold my cheeks in his hands, lean forward, and kiss my lips. Outside the French windows, there were fireworks bursting in all directions, as hot as his love. They bloomed into the most gorgeous flowers. I put my arms around his neck and kissed him back. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Daniel beside me had already fallen asleep. I remembered the words his friend had said to me. I gently moved the hand that Daniel had around me, quietly walked to his study, and opened the drawer on one side. Inside was a thick stack of airplane tickets. Without exception, they were all for the same destination, from Hong Kong City to Kyoto. I had no idea that during the days we were apart, he had secretly come to see me many times. Epilogue, Daniel's perspective. The first time I saw Sylvia was on an evening in late autumn during a heavy rainstorm. After discussing some project issues of our startup company with my roommates, we decided to go to the library. Holding an umbrella outside the library, I saw a beautiful girl standing at the entrance. Under the dim light at the entrance, she stood there obediently, as if waiting for someone, with her long hair draped over her shoulders. Her delicate and beautiful features amazed many people. Perhaps she sensed my gaze, and the girl looked up at me in confusion. She met my eyes through the heavy rain. I was slightly taken aback. Looking into those clear eyes, my heart warmed up. It was not until her friend came out, squeezed under her umbrella, and left with her. When I got back to the dormitory, that figure would always flash through my mind. Just then, my roommate sitting in front of the computer shouted, "A toad wants to eat a swan's meat." I looked down and saw on the screen a scene of the girl being pursued by a guy wearing clothes with lots of brand logos. I felt nervous in my heart. On impulse, I asked, "Did she agree?" My roommate chuckled and said, "How could she? This Bruce is a well-known upstart. He has messed with so many senior and junior female students in the school. He has a really bad reputation. How could Sylvia be with him? She has already rejected him." Hey, Daniel, since when have you been paying attention to these things? I didn't say anything. I just felt happy. Later, I often appeared around Sylvia, but I didn't expect that after a few times, the girl would deliberately choose to sit in the seat next to me. Once when I went to play basketball by chance, the girl sat aside and watched. Then, with a blushing face, she handed me a bottle of water. It seemed that she had mustered up a great deal of courage. There was only me in those clear eyes. I understood something. My heart started beating wildly. The day Sylvia proposed the breakup, she said such hurtful words. My lips were trembling, and I almost burst into tears. In the silence, I calmed down my emotions and asked her in a low voice, "Can we not break up?" Sylvia didn't say anything. I was enveloped in darkness. I heard her say, "We have to break up." "Okay," I said. I couldn't cage her by my side in the name of love, could I? Although I had thought about it just now, it didn't matter whether Sylvia still loved me or not, as long as she was by my side. But I still gave up. She had the right to choose. During the 3 months after breaking up with Sylvia, I would reserve a seat for her in advance. When I saw that she was sitting on the chair and refused to leave, I immediately went to the snack store to buy sanitary pads and asked her roommate to give them to her. I didn't let her roommate say that it was me who bought them. It was my last bit of pride. On the night of graduation, I decided to propose to Sylvia. After getting everything ready, I was so nervous that I was sweating all over. I thought that Sylvia might reject me, but I couldn't imagine in what situation we would meet again after graduation. I had thought that maybe we would get back together and get married, but I never thought that Sylvia's roommate would tell me that she had taken a plane to City B overnight. Later, I often fantasized in the empty room that she was still there, still in my arms, or she would complain in a coquettish voice that I always liked to bite her. After a period of time, I dreamed that after work, I saw Sylvia standing with her hands on her hips, wearing a short skirt, and arguing with me. She complained that I was too bossy, but I would always shake my head and refuse because her legs were too attractive. And somehow I didn't like the way other men looked at her. That night, I held Sylvia in my arms and slept for a long time. When I told my friend about it, he took me to see a psychologist. I thought, this is really bad. With this kind of illness, I was even more unworthy of Sylvia. Finally, I couldn't resist the longing and made many round trips to Kyoto to see Sylvia. I watched as she gradually shed her childishness in City B. She was so beautiful that it made my heart flutter. Later, I heard that Sylvia's mother had been in a car accident. I didn't hesitate to return to our hometown, and I saw Sylvia, who was on a blind date. I was originally glad that in the 7 years, Sylvia hadn't fallen in love with anyone else. But when I saw her on a blind date, I couldn't help feeling sour and jealous. But I could only pretend to be calm. She would never know that the moment we met again, my heart had recognized her even before I did. When I found out that my mother had approached Sylvia, tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. I didn't know that the person I loved so carefully had been humiliated like that. It was like a sharp knife stabbing deeply into my heart. I squatted on the ground, covered my eyes, and my whole body was shaking. I even felt that I couldn't face Sylvia for the rest of my life. I went back and took back everything I had given my mother over the years. I refused to pay off the hundreds of thousands of yuan in gambling debts she owed from the day before. My mother cursed at me from behind. "You're treating me like this for such a woman. I'm your mother." My fingertips were trembling, and I said in a hoarse voice, "You should be glad that you're my mother. Otherwise, I don't know what I would do." I took action. My younger brother didn't dare to say anything and could only curse as he took my mother away. After returning to Hong Kong City, I looked at the dim yellow light inside the glass window of the penthouse. Somehow, I didn't dare to go up. It was not until Sylvia came down. I hugged her tightly. Fortunately, Sylvia and I were together again. It was a pity that Sylvia and I had missed 7 years of each other's lives. But fortunately, 7 years later, we were still by each other's side. Let our love surge, and we will indulge in this love for the rest of our lives. The end.